All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat.
And I'm Eric.
And I am Stan.
And we're doing an episode today a little bit off the cuff. We were actually planning on taking a break this week, and freaking Square Enix has to drop Final Fantasy 16. So, being the RPG podcast we dropped everything, and we're doing a special episode today to talk about our impressions with Final Fantasy 16. Now, I do want to reemphasize that the trailer literally dropped today. So if you're watching this, a couple weeks from today, I'm sure there's been a lot of information that's been released. So maybe go check out a future episode of ours also that has some more in-depth analysis with the latest information.
Or maybe you can watch it and just be like, oh, wow, these guys were so wrong about it. Just so wrong.
Yeah. I just remember when we did our E3 2019, like we streamed the Square Enix presentation, and then we stopped the recording, and then we did another follow-up stream with our thoughts like 20 minutes later on the 7 remake trailer. And there were so many people in the like for like 5 months that would comment to correct what we said. And I was like, dude, this was recorded the day, anyways. So we didn't see the Treehouse interview or whatever it was, because it didn't happen yet. Anyways,
right.
So that's kind of the situation we're going in. We're just going to give our off-the-cuff thoughts, and then I'm sure next week, we'll go in a little bit more in depth and maybe go through the trailer footage very closely and that type of thing. But today we're just going to be talking about what we thought about the trailer. Final Fantasy 16 is officially announced. We know that the producer is going to be Yoshi-P, which there was a rumor going around that he was involved, and apparently this is not fake news, like he called it. This is actually real. So he's producing Final Fantasy 16.
Game company's lying. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. And then we have the director, who is the assistant director of Final Fantasy 14, Hiroshi Takai, I believe it was. And so he's going to be directing this game with, obviously Yoshi-P as a producer. And it's going to be exclusive on the PS5, except a little asterisk at the bottom. It said it's also coming to PC. So I'm sure that cost Sony a pretty penny to get them to be able to say that. We'll see.
Console exclusive.
Well, in 2020 though, that all that means is, Sony paid them enough money for it to be exclusive till like 2022, right? Because there's been plenty of games that have done that. But regardless, that's a big deal, and this was a big deal for Sony because that was a hot way to come off the press. I mean, it's just, I think next generation's closed deal right now, but we'll see. But anyways, so yeah, this was the only game shown that I'm aware of that had the little pre-message that this was only PC footage that was emulating PS5, whereas all the other games were PS5, but they said we're going to find out more information about this game in 2021. Now, it's kind of baffling to me, and I guess we can just open it up at this point, but it's kind of baffling to me that this game was running on PC, not PS5, which indicates it's early footage, meaning it's not, it's a couple years away from actual release, most likely. We didn't see a user interface. We didn't see a menu system. I'm not even quite sure I heard the protagonist's voice. I kind of feel like I did, but I'm not, it could be somebody else. But, it seems like it's early footage, but it was a 5-minute trailer, which is really long. So
Naoki Yoshida did confirm that the gameplay you saw was actual gameplay. It wasn't like
good.
mock-up gameplay.
That's good. That's really good. That's the first concern is, sometimes with Final Fantasy 13, for example, we had some early trailers where they actually made CG footage that looked like, like it was gameplay. But it
15 as well.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay. And 15 as well. So that's definitely a concern with this. But I guess my biggest thing with this is it looks, there's a lot of things to like about the trailer, but I'm just cautious with Square Enix because I've been through this so many times where they make a trailer and then the game doesn't come out for like 6 years. And then they try to make the entire game based on this like initial 3-minute trailer that somebody got together that seemed like a cool concept. And, you know, that's what happened to 15. Like, you can go back and watch an hour and a half worth of trailers for 15 before, you know, the game was even announced for PlayStation 4. So it's just,
Well, here's the
I'm
thing with
cautious.
Naoki. Yeah, here's the thing with Naoki Yoshida. I'm not exactly praising the man's communication, but first off, yes, his communication with his audience is stellar, absolutely stellar. The thing is, though, like other people like Atase and Nomura, they're like they come out of their hole sometimes to speak to the public. Then they'll go right back in their hole and hide for a very long time. Naoki Yoshida, with his involvement in 14, he is constantly doing interviews, constant interviews. Like, if you just typed in Naoki Yoshida interview, you can find hundreds and hundreds of results. Because he, over the years, he does interview after interview, especially near expansion time. There's no way he can escape these Final Fantasy 16 questions.
Right.
They're just going to happen. And he's going to say a lot of, we can't talk about this right now, but such and such. So I have a feeling he's going to be very clear, because he's already been clear that 16 will not be at the Tokyo Game Show.
Yeah.
But he did say more information is coming 2021.
Yeah, so
We didn't
he's
really
already
get that
aware.
with other companies. Like, you're going to say more info coming soon. So we're always speculating every week when more FF7 info is going to come. But then the 16, they're already saying, look, you can start speculating in 2021, but you're not getting anything for the rest of the year. Just letting you know.
Yeah, that was probably a very good idea for him to get ahead on that, because if he has to be have an open line of communication with, you know, he's still the director and producer of 14 while he's going to be the producer on 16. So he's kind of wearing two hats, you know, and so with that, he needs to keep the open line of communication for 14 and its updates. And I'm sure he was aware that now that this news came out, he's just going to get bombarded, right, with questions about Final Fantasy 16. So he's getting ahead of it and saying, "Hey, no more information until 2021. So please don't bother me for the next 3.5 months, you know, about Final Fantasy 16."
So what I'm hearing from this is, you know, I'm going to expect a trailer on January 1st, 2021. Just that thing better be
That's what they
uploaded.
said, right? That's what
Yeah,
they said.
2021.
Yeah,
Confirmed.
we will riot if we don't.
No, I mean, look, uh, maybe that's why we got a nearly 5-minute trailer, is he just thought, you know, if we gave him 30 seconds, if we gave him a screenshot, you know, channels like ours would probably tear that screenshot apart for 10 minutes, like looking at every, oh, is that a bird? Is that a bird or is that a dragon? You know, like just like really tearing it apart. So he may have thought, hey, let's just give him 5 minutes. And this will be just, they'll be able to make rumor videos. And, you know, that's not really what we do, but, you know, other YouTube channels will be able to just look at it frame by frame and just be making, you know, and gushing over what was shown for, you know, easily months, I would think, with such a long trailer. But I guess I'm still cautiously, I'm trying to be cautious about this because this was a long trailer and we didn't see any user interface or anything. So I'm just kind of like, like what's going to, like, once we know, have a better idea when this thing's going to come out, I'll feel better about what was shown.
Can I start off by just saying the Fabula Nova Crystallis crap is officially done?
It's over, yeah.
We have something new.
Kind of.
13 and 15
kind of
has been a thing. This
That's true.
universe has been a thing since 2006. And just now in 2020, we are in new territory. New territory, finally. We can start not knowing what our next Final Fantasies are going to be.
Well, it seems to me that while we're technically done, from what we've seen in the trailer, it's very similar, right? Like there's gods and the gods are controlling their fate and the gods are like warring. Some of them don't like each other and they're trying to dethrone the gods. And that's very Final Fantasy 13-esque, right? With, I mean, it's different. Obviously it's a different tone, it's much more mature.
I feel it's closer to Final Fantasy 15, where like the summons are like, or in that game they were called the primals, or
Right.
I
Yeah, there
can't
seems
remember
to
what they're
be
called.
factions in this game, like kingdoms/factions. They each have their own mother crystal, from what I'm hearing in the trailer. So, like, one faction just tried to use Titan to defeat this one, another one summoned Shiva. So it seems like there's going to be a lot of war conflict
Mhm.
happening in this game.
Yeah.
And I don't think it makes me think that there's probably and probably not going to be like a good or bad guy type of scenario thing here again, because probably each faction is probably going to be like an asshole in their own special way, or it could be like a very personal story with like the main character and he's guarding this
That's not going to
small
happen.
child named Josh, and there's just bigger conflict happening.
Right.
The world is building as you go about that. Like
Yeah.
I was trying to pick apart like how this story is structured, and I don't feel like we have enough info yet. But
No.
from what I've seen, I can't like I'm trying to see if this is like a more broad story, or it's going to be like a very personal story
It
with these
seems
two characters.
it seems to me, and this is the, if you can't tell by the way I've been talking, I'm kind of, I have mixed feelings with what was shown, but it seems to me that we're more of an observer than we are the actual center of the story. And I don't know how I feel about that, because I guess that just makes me a little worried, but it seems like most of the story sequences that were shown involve other people and we're kind of just there. I mean, there are some little references to the player themselves, but it seems like, you know, you're just accompanying this kid on this journey, and, you know, a lot of crazy things happen to these other characters and you're there as well. And it doesn't look like we have, at least right now anyways, you know, a cast of characters like we've gotten with the other Final Fantasies. It looks very much a, I don't want to say a solo adventure, or an
Yeah.
adventure where maybe like somebody might join you for a fight or two, but it's not going to be your Final Fantasy X with your, you know, 8 characters and they're all, you know, and stuff like that. So it's definitely a different route.
Yeah, I'll if the story's good enough, then I can look past it. But I won't say there's no hope yet. Maybe they will do maybe like a Kingdom Hearts thing where you have multiple people who can join you in a fight and you can like allocate them to help you indirectly.
Hmm.
Similar to 15, but maybe instead this time like you have like full control of what your character does, and maybe you can summon like a system similar to FF7 where you can tell other characters what you want them to do, or like FF12, except you focus on your character and you know they're doing their own program type thing. That would be really awesome because that would keep you focused on yourself while still letting them assist you at the same time. Not saying that's going to happen this game. It could be a solo game, especially since the Devil May Cry battle director is helping
Right.
with this. I don't know. I don't know if they'll be inspired by his work or he'll be inspired by their work. I don't know, but um, uh, I guess we just haven't seen enough to know for sure if we have party members coming in. So I'll be hopeful and say they are. But if not, if they can do a good job of convincing me, I can look past it.
Here's my worst nightmare with this. Okay. And I'm just going to get it out here. Okay. It's a single person adventure. The character themselves, I'm not like, I heard some little dialogue about I'm Joshua's shield or something like that. And then it seems like at the end we might have some kind of protagonist voice, but it, for a 5 minute long trailer, we didn't see any really like long lines of dialogue or any like emotional scenes with the main character. We didn't see the main character like crying or wincing in pain. Really, it seemed like other characters. So I'm afraid that it's gone for a very Western style where you can kind of make your own adventurer and you're just this observer, and the combat with Devil May Cry guy, right, or Capcom guy, is going this Devil May Cry route where we're going to have a 15-hour long action adventure game with, skill trees and just barely enough to call it an RPG. And that'll be the things to
That'll
come.
be it.
Yeah, because
honestly, I hope not.
Yeah, me too. I hope not. But it's just the vibe that I get, because I mean it's weird that you would have a trailer and not introduce your main character that much at all, and that makes me wonder if it's supposed to be a player avatar more than, the actual protagonist.
Well, yeah, but remember the end of the trailer, you had him looking at the camera, the younger version of him, and then the older version of him came in right after.
Mm-hmm.
It almost makes me wonder if this game the story will span a couple years.
Was that an older version of him, or was that like his enemy or something?
I mean, same eyes, same hair color.
Yeah.
He looked like an older, more like rugged version of his younger self.
Because I thought maybe that was how you could, like, they were kind of hinting that you could change elements of the face.
Well, they had combat footage of both when he's young and when he's older.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some time jumping here too, probably.
Yeah, which an older, at least, like somebody in their mid-20s protagonist, right, for an FF game, that would be a nice change of pace. Right? Because oftentimes these JRPGs, you have hardened 17-year-olds by the end of the game saving the world, right? And that's kind of like a trope that I think a lot of Western players are like, it's like kind of jarring.
Yeah.
I guess
so I wonder if
did that.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to see him talk and like do something in a story sequence.
I think when he's talking about Joshua and his line at the end, like "I'll kill you," he's swearing revenge against somebody. I think that is the main character's voice.
Yeah, but why don't we have scenes with the main character? Why are they all other characters? It just seems like you're you're just an observer rather than an actual, huge player in the story, aside from fighting. And I mean, I can't knock it until I play it, but I gotta be honest, that part disappoints me. Now they might be holding back, but I feel like they showed a lot.
I understand, because previous Final Fantasy trailers, obviously focused and centered on Titus, focused and centered on
Noctis,
Lightning, and Noctis. That like you knew these were the main characters. This trailer does make you question that a little bit on what is exactly going to happen. I do have a feeling he's going to be the main character, like without a doubt. But you're right, they didn't really center focus on him. Like you didn't get to see him like talk or interact much with other people. It was more other characters,
right,
talking and narrating. So I think a second trailer will fix all of that.
Yeah,
and give us a better understanding. But I do think this is a centralized character that we play.
Yeah, well, I do. Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, I think that the character, will be playing as that character that they're showing, and that they'll have that, the roles, the shield, and they'll go around protecting whoever's in the story, and it can be interesting that way. I just wonder if it's going to be like, it just strikes me like it's going to be a choose your dialogue options, right? Every time your player needs to interact, you get to choose the dialogue. And that's the way you interact with the world, which can be fun too. It's just
not very Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much more of a Western approach if they do that. But I mean, they want to sell these games in the West, right? So
I'm going to predict this now, and I want to come back to this video if I'm right, that when 16 comes out. I'm going to predict this game is going to have two major parts of the story. The first half is going to be when he's younger and he's protecting Joshua. Midway through the game, something bad's going to happen. Like Josh is going to go out of control or something, like he has some special power. And then shit gets real. Okay. And then the second half is going to be years later. And your main character is like, it's sort of like a FF6 type of deal where something really bad happens to the
Fantasy 15.
story. scenario. FF15 also, Dragon Quest 11. Take your pick. But there's going to be a second half of the game where it's like 5 years later, and you're taking in everything, or like you're venturing through the world again, but through like after 5 years, like after some disaster that happened. Maybe all the summons came together at the same time and blew up everything. I don't know, but then maybe it's like a search for Josh instead of guarding him, and then maybe he's like the final boss. I don't know.
I will echo your prediction, but I will say the bad thing that happens to Joshua, or the bad thing in general, happens 25% through the game.
Okay, 25%.
25%, more of like
25 to 50.
Yeah, more of like a Final Fantasy Tactics type of deal, where like Ramza is well, I don't want to spoil that because that's like a really great moment, but something happens kind of earlier in that game that kind of changes the plot, and factions change and stuff. So yeah,
I just feel like if they're going out of their way to already show off the same character with two different timeline looks to him, I feel like there's just going to be two major story arcs to the game.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can totally agree with that they'll have that change, and it seems like, there's something at stake for our main character here. He says he's willing to kill somebody at any cost, so we have to kind of figure out what that means really. And the only thing we got to go on right now anyways is this battle with the Aeons, and then he's protecting Joshua, and there clearly seems to be some kind of conflict going on. So yeah, I mean, that all sounds very, very reasonable. I think you guys are right. I think I need another trailer because I'm like sitting here like thinking like, is there like a love interest for the protagonist? Like, does he have a best friend? Like, like where's those people? I want to see them acknowledging our main character more. So
yeah,
it definitely. Oh, you go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say all the story dialogue, the little bits of story dialogue we got in this trailer was very political, I guess you could say. Like it was much more plot. It seemed like more plot centric dialogue.
Sure.
Like throne room scenes, like
well,
beseeching
honestly,
the king for aid, or things of that nature, rather than like characters discussing their motivations or stuff like that. Other than I must protect Joshua. That's it. That's all you got, for for the main character's motivations. But yeah, I think there will probably be another trailer, but not till next year.
January 1st, 2021.
Yeah.
I guess wasn't the only one who noticed that blood got sprayed all over a small child.
Yes.
In the trailer, which gets me to thinking,
might be
this
M-rated.
may be the first mainline Final Fantasy that gets a mature rating.
Here's go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm curious about that because Final Fantasy 15 had, some darker, more mature content like in its trailers and promotional material that ended up kind of not really being in the game, right? It got kind of cut, and I think because they wanted to make sure they maintained that teen rating to get higher sales.
That's a good point.
And then we also know with Final Fantasy VII Remake, there were certain scenes towards the end of the game that involved blood that they altered, right? So that they wouldn't have to show blood in the game, thinking back, I don't think there's any blood in that game at all. So for them to show it in this trailer is kind of a nice change of pace, but the cynical side of me wonders, like, well, is it actually going to happen? Like,
that kid got one thing and blood. You can't. I mean, the teen rating can't get past that.
Yeah, but I mean,
they're going to have to tone that down significantly if they want the teen rating.
It's going to be like pasta.
Yeah, it's one thing for it to be in
all over him.
Like they showed it in they showed it in the conceptual trailer, right? The blood, right. But there was conceptual trailers for Final Fantasy 15 as well, where that more darker.
Well, you had
it into the game. So
you had the Omen trailer, which came out a month before the game, but it was not the game at all, which was baffling. But in that trailer, you had Noctis literally stabbing, Luna, which was a totally different plot line from the main game. But yeah, that's true. They end up cutting a lot. They even did that with Final Fantasy 12 in Japan. They ended up having to cut an abduction scene out because it was going to get a different rating because of events going on at the time. So yeah, that stuff happens. Yeah. When I first saw this trailer and it came up, like I was like, oh shit. Like right when I saw a chocobo, because well, honestly, right when the first 2 seconds aired, I saw a face and it looked like a Final Fantasy 14 person. And I thought, is this Final Fantasy? And then I saw a chocobo appear and I was like, oh, this is Final Fantasy. But I thought it was a Final Fantasy 14 expansion or something because
I did too.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. And I was like, okay, this is them announcing Final Fantasy 14 coming to the PlayStation 5 with a brand new expansion. And, I kind of was watching a stream of it and some of the textures looked a little muddy. Even if I go through here a little bit, some of the scenes look worse than, better than others. But, so I thought this was going to be Final Fantasy 14 expansion. And so, but once I saw some of the blood shooting on people's faces and stuff, that part, well, I'm not a gore addict. Like I don't look forward to just seeing people's heads chopped off or anything. I do like that fact, that element of that maturity bleeding into this game. If that maintains and it doesn't get removed, like Stan said, that is one thing that I have wanted from a Final Fantasy for a long time is basically I want like Witcher 3, but with chocobos. Like I always thought that would be like so badass. And so I liked that mature aspect that they did have in this trailer. I like that they're going that route. And I do like that they're having that Final Fantasy 14 influence, which is something that a lot of people have wanted, with the next game to be Final Fantasy 14-esque, where it's more medieval and you kind of have that kind of art style and approach. But I think I'm just so uneasy about the amount of changes that I can't, I'm just worried this is going to be like a 15-hour Devil May Cry with a skill tree,
me as the 14 fanboy here, like I knew the first second that it wasn't 14 related.
Right.
But they use similar things that come from 14. Like the text that describe like the legend continues or something like that.
Yeah.
It is the same text that they used recently for Reflections in Crystal, the 5.3 patch, and a lot of the text and dialogue they do for 14. So I knew this was going to be Naoki Yoshida's new game. I was just waiting for the FF16 to pop up, hopefully, or whatever Final Fantasy Type 1. I was actually thinking it might be a sequel to Final Fantasy Type or something like that. But I was thinking to myself, wow, this is way too good to be just simply an action title. But the character designs it's either by the same team or they're very influenced by 14's design visuals. But if you compare characters from that to that one, you'll see that they are actually pretty different. But I can actually see why people would get mistaken for that.
Right, especially if you don't play 14 on a regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah, like for me, I thought it was 14 initially also because of the characters, like they're like it's a Square Enix game, but it's not the characters don't have that like how do I put it, like stylized realism they go for with like FF7 remake or like Final Fantasy 15, right? They clearly don't look like those characters, which made me think FF14 right away, especially like with the hair, something about the hair, like with the characters, like short, right? Like short hair.
Right.
Whereas Nomura's designs are more like, going crazy a bit, but
that is it. Go ahead.
How do you feel about it taking a very clear Western, like Game of Thrones looking, or Witcher? No, I wouldn't say Witcher. Maybe Game of Thrones. Probably the safest thing to compare it to, like that type of Western ideology theming in its game and mixing it with Final Fantasy.
Well, there is like, I would say, and we're not going to get like super in depth into this trailer here because we'll spend 4 hours on that. We can do that later, but there is an early part about a minute or so into the trailer where you're in this like courtyard type thing. And I swear to God, it looks like it's almost straight out of Game of Thrones from the first season, where your main protagonist looks like Jon Snow, and you're kind of like the odd man out, and it kind of has that vibe going. I mean, I'm all for it. It's just there's something that feels off to me, and I think I like the art aesthetic. I like the design. I just have a feeling like this game is not coming out for a really long time because, some of the textures are still like not fully developed. And, a lot of the characters have very plain looking clothes, which like our main protagonist has a very basic outfit compared to some of the other characters with a very elaborate like armor. And I'm just looking for, that JRPG, where's Arden with a very elaborate robe and stuff. And it's
that flair, right?
Yeah. And it almost feels like they took models from Final Fantasy 14 and just like spruced them up, and like this is still very, very early. And this is like a conceptual thing that Sony wanted for the PS5, and that this game's not coming out for like 4 years. And because it's still running on PC footage too, it's not even running on the PS5. So I'm sorry, Eric, I drifted totally away from your question, but I think it's cool that they're going for that more Game of Thrones look. I don't have a problem with it. There's something very plain looking about the characters, though.
I do remember that Yoshida said in an interview, maybe 2 or 3, I think 2 years ago, but it might be 3 years ago by now. He said when he was asked if he wanted to direct Final Fantasy 16, he said he would do it if the company or the fans wanted him to. And then he said that if it was up to him, he would go to back to high fantasy, like a high fantasy.
See, but to me, that means like Final Fantasy 9 high fantasy. That's kind of what I was hoping for 16. I can't see a Moogle being in this world.
No,
maybe maybe it could, but I was kind of wanting that Final Fantasy 6 or Final Fantasy 9 high fantasy. This is cool too. This is really gritty. This is a different route.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just apprehensive.
I've said it in previous podcasts, but I'll say it again. I've given into the idea that, or just convinced myself that Final Fantasy is just never going to be the same again.
I mean, can you see airships in this?
We're never going to get a Sakaguchi like Final Fantasy again. So I just tell myself, just embrace what they're coming out with now and just hope that it's good.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because in this trailer, there was some like text on the screen that they put out that said, let me find it real quick. I want to make sure I get it right. So it said, I believe it said the legacy of the crystals, something like that.
Yeah, well, it's got to be.
I remember what you're talking about. It's near the end, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
The legacy of the crystals will continue, or something like that. Legacy of the crystals, and then it keeps going, and I think it says something else after that.
It says
has shaped our history.
Yeah, the legacy of the crystals has shaped our history for long enough. Right? So like coming to an end. No more.
So they're doing it again, just like 7 Remake.
To me, that's it's probably story related. So I'm guessing the main character or the faction the main character is a part of wants to rid the world of the crystals. Like the crystals are like maybe like a very powerful resource to like the kingdoms or something, and he wants to get rid of them. But I also think it's an encoded message that the legacy of our history, meaning Final Fantasy, right, is based on the crystals for long enough, meaning that's it. Like Final Fantasy is moving into a new direction, and it's not going back. It's not going to turn-based, right? It's not ever going to be 2D sprites or anything like that ever again. Like they have a vision for this game and for the future of Final Fantasy, and they're rolling with it, right?
So here's
ever since 15, they went action combat with 15, right? They have no intention of ever going back to turn-based combat. It's just not happening. They want you to buy Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler 2 and their other games to get that turn-based combat. They need Final Fantasy to appeal to a very large audience, and in their estimation, they need to change it for that. And I think that's what the legacy of the crystals, uh, it was their history, but now it's no more. Like they're moving forward. They're moving past that.
Here's what I think, and I agree with you halfway that I do think that they are like I have. There's not a doubt in my mind we'll never have a turn-based Final Fantasy, mainline Final Fantasy again. Yeah. I would never expect that ever, So I think that's clear. I don't know if they would actually be snubbing. Maybe they don't look at it like that, but basically I would look at it like that, snubbing the fan base like that, because they are trying to market this game, right? I think that this is just another Destiny type plot line like we saw with Final Fantasy 13, where you had to reclaim your ability to in your own life, or Final Fantasy 12, you had to take out the Akira to reclaim your ability to, for the history of your people and to be able to have player agency or in your own lives. And, the same thing goes with, well, I don't want to spoil that game, but it seems to me like they're just kind of doing the Destiny thing again. And, the crystals this is another weird thing too, is ever since Sakaguchi left, Square Enix's obsession with the crystal lore has just amplified. I mean, because what most people would consider to be the pinnacle of the Final Fantasy series was the PlayStation era, and maybe Final Fantasy X too, depending on how you look at it. But those games, like Final Fantasy VII, had almost nothing to do with crystals, and that was their most successful Final Fantasy.
Well, it was
Materia was
well, I mean, but the game wasn't. Okay, let me rephrase this before I get eaten in the comments. They always found a way to put a crystal in the game, but it wasn't they didn't the trailers weren't like people worshiping the crystal like they do now with 15's trailer. It has Luna talking about the crystal. There's so much, every nation has a crystal. Final Fantasy 12, every nation has a crystal. It's just they've really gone back to the Final Fantasy 1 through 3 days. Like we're really nostalgic for those damn crystals. And I gotta be honest, I don't care. Put them in there somehow, make it, a part of the lore. But anyways, so I guess that's the way I'm looking at it. To get back to your initial point was that, I mean, the Final Fantasy, most of the big Final Fantasies, Final Fantasy X, I mean, there was very, very little usage of a crystal. It was kind of almost jerry-rigged in there. So the actual
spheres were the crystals.
Yeah, but still, would you say that was a major part of the game?
No, they were only a plot device to continue certain events in the story, but they weren't the center of the story.
Right. So
say Final Fantasy V or Final Fantasy IV.
Right. So I wouldn't say the legacy of Final Fantasy centers around these crystals. So, I mean, maybe if they are taking that route that, hey, the crystals are done, we're going in a new route, I would be like, good. So you're going back to the PlayStation era? Because, I mean, good. Because I don't know. So it's just, anyways,
to me, I think they're using the word crystals to symbolize the old Final Fantasy, the old way, because that's something that was pretty.
Do you think they would actually do that in the game though to their fan base? I feel like they would just make a game, and if it was really successful, they'd be like, "That's why we're going to keep doing that."
I think it has a double meaning. So I think it's plot relevant. Like I said, I think there will be crystals in this game, and a big part of the game will be banishing them or getting rid of them, right? Or society moving on from these crystals that generate power for the kingdoms or something.
This just seems to me like Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 12. It seems like the same type of story where the gods are controlling everyone's fate, and we got to take out the gods.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
No, that's usually Final Fantasy ends up. You're in a nice little village in chapter 1, then chapter 10's all kill God.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I kind of welcome this change, like to this type of style. I guess you got to throw like crystals, airships, and chocobos just to remind people, hey, it is a Final Fantasy game. Um, but I really do embrace this Western style change that that they're clearly trying to portray here. Because
Mhm.
I don't know, I know I'm kind of maybe in the minority on this, but I wasn't enjoying the fact that some of the Final Fantasies felt like it was going in a very anime-ish direction,
For sure.
like a
Yeah.
lot of the spin-offs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Well,
And
wait until
and
we see a profile of our main character and they claim he's like 13.
no, maybe. I
He's
think he's probably gonna be 16 or 17, and it's gonna be a 5 to 10 year gap if we get him as an adult.
Yeah. That seems about right.
yeah.
He definitely looks like he's at least in his mid-20s,
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
his
absolutely,
older self.
absolutely. I definitely applaud that. But no, Eric, I completely agree with you. I mean, the especially 13 was very. I don't know if you would say that's anime, but it seemed anime to me. And then 15 definitely had a little bit of that as well, which I didn't appreciate. So it is very cool that they're kind of drifting away from that for sure. Let's just hope that that doesn't come at the expense of a cast of characters, like we've had in the prior games. Because I mean, I think you could still have, your band of heroes that you travel with, Lord of the Rings style, right? Where you travel with them on your adventure. They're part of your party. You can battle with them, but still have an engaging story and not be, super
That
anime-ish either.
that I completely agree on. You can still keep the theme of a band of diverse characters come together to take on a greater evil.
Yeah.
Like I always like those kind of stories, and like you and I agree with you. You can definitely have a story like that and be set in a world like this for sure.
Yeah.
I guess it's just as long as the everything comes together. Like I said, we could potentially have a lot more main characters join our group,
Hmm.
and maybe like have the action combat have support characters, and maybe they're just wanting to show off just the main character for now. But
Yeah.
I'll be
In
hopeful of that.
Yeah, because in both Final Fantasy 13 and 15's case, the reveal trailer just showed the main character. It was Lightning, and then in 15 it was Noctis by themselves, just alone. Like, and that wasn't in-game footage; it was just conceptual.
Right. Which that's
So,
yeah. Well, I mean,
so it's kind of the same thing. They introduced the games with just the main character in action combat, right? So there's still a possibility that we'll get like party-based combat in this game. Though if it's like a Devil May Cry battle system, that will be interesting to see how they do that.
right,
you know, but
right.
it's there's still a chance that it won't be just a single character combat focused. So
Well, I think those games focused on those characters because the story revolved around those characters, right? Or at least that was the plan of it anyway. So I guess that's. But yeah, I mean, there's still a chance for sure. I mean, this is a 4-minute trailer. Actually, I've been saying 5. So the thing that'll be interesting to see is when this game actually launches, if to go back and watch this trailer and try to spot how much of it is actually in the game, you know, because
mm,
this is another game development problem in general, but Square especially is the first trailer almost
they jam all the
Well,
concepts, right? Get the
uh,
concepts in there.
get the
Show them
concepts in there, but
show 'em all the concepts.
then people complain because they don't like this, they don't like that, and they start making tweaks, and then they realize
Or
their vision was too big, and they got to like restructure
yeah,
it. And by the time the game comes out, it's like not even the same thing.
yeah,
well,
like
hopefully
like
they're smarter this time and only show stuff they know for a fact is in the final version of the game.
Well, why is it
Like,
on PC, not PS5? It makes me. That's the only thing that gets me. If this was on a PlayStation 5, if it said running on a PlayStation 5, and they said more coming in 2021, I would be sitting here thinking like, guys, we might get a release date in 2021. But
yeah, because I get combat can change over time,
right,
which I completely get, which is fine. But you are showing all these significant cutscenes for FF15 and I could easily say about 75% of it didn't make it into the main game.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you had a scene with like Noctis King Regis holding his child over the car, and then like you have the whole Omen thing, which was technically in the game, but it was
they
just used as a
patched it
dream
in.
sequence.
Yeah, they patched it in later.
And yeah, like, and you're not even in Insomnia.
Yeah, there's trailers with
the
them
first,
in Insomnia in Daylight, and that never happened.
yeah. So there's so much they showed that was just not there. And I do hope, like, at least story wise, they just show what they know for a fact will be in the game.
Yeah, I agree.
They need to be um
I think that would be
competent.
a good idea. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. I don't think that's what they did. I think they needed like a bang bang trailer. They probably also knew that this was going to lead off the press conference, the digital event, the Sony showcase. And so they're like action. Like we need action in there. We need intense, snappy dialogue if we can, and get summons on the screen. People like summons.
Yeah, I think
Speaking of which,
well,
one last question.
Sure.
Open world or not open world?
I think it will be.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. I think it's going to be, dude. It's going to be it's going to be a 15-hour game. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be a 15-hour game. I don't think it'll be open world. I think it'll be very God of War linear. I think that it's going to be very story focused. I mean, I don't know, based on what we're seeing right now. I mean, Stan, I agree with you. I think that Sony said they went shopping and they were looking to get exclusivity. And I think they wanted to just nail the coffin on the console war early. And they wanted Final Fantasy 16 on, during the announcements to really just end the debate over which console a lot of people are going to buy. And so I think that was part of the deal. Like, you got to show us a trailer, and Square's good at making trailers. I mean, because we get a general premise here of what's going on, but I kind of I'm with you. It kind of feels like they just were like, let's have lots of blood, lots of like Aeons battling. We want to see, just wild stuff happening every 10 seconds. And
none of that was CG though. That was all in game according to them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it's all running on PC.
Yeah, technically. That's a very interesting message. I mean, I'm glad they're being truthful, but it kind of just shows how far in development they are with this. I'm thinking this is gonna be a 2022 game.
Oh, bro, I'm thinking 2024. Easily.
I'm gonna be optimistic and say 2022.
Stan, what are you saying?
I'll split the middle and say 2023. I guess. But
I'll say they're going to announce in 2023. They'll say it's 2023, but then it'll get delayed till 2024. So that's what I'm going to say.
It's going to come out. I think it's going to come out before 7 Remake Part 2. Probably the year before, whenever that one comes out.
Well, technically, we've already,
They got to spread out their big games, right? They're going to have probably 16, then Remake Part 2, and then like Kingdom Hearts 4, like spaced out appropriately, because they want to have good sales, like steady sales over a long period. So
right. Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. Is there anything else you guys want to say about this trailer? I mean, I was surprised that it was here. I was thinking if there was going to be any Final Fantasy presence at this show, it was going to be maybe a remaster of Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PS5, or maybe someone brought up a HD or Super HD remaster of Final Fantasy 13 for the PS5, or something like that, or maybe the glimpse of Part 2 for 7 Remake. I thought there's no way in hell I thought they were going to show 16 here, so I was definitely really surprised, despite all the rumors, because there's rumors every time there's a state of play or something. There were rumors that there's going to be Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, well, one thing is the graphics, while they don't look bad, they do not look like, they didn't wow me, I guess, like for a next gen game.
I totally agree. Yeah.
like it looks like a PS4 game. Like the character models to me look about on par with Final Fantasy 15, which was a game that, doesn't look bad, but it came out,
I I think
several years ago at this point.
I
So,
think the skin looks better than 15 because the skin actually looks soft, whereas in 15 the skin is very wooden. So it
mhm,
kind of reminds me a little bit of 7 Remake because it actually has like real like actual skin and not, like wax skin. But I did that was my first thought too, was this looks like a PS4 game. There are moments where you can kind of see some next gen stuff. There's some like water reflections and stuff that look like it might have a little bit of ray tracing on it, which is not going
mhm.
to be a PS4 game. But it's kind of hard to tell because some of the cutscenes are
Did they
like look
confirm the
really.
engine?
I have no idea, but some of the
Not that
cut
I'm aware of.
some of the cutscenes
Yeah.
are really detailed, and then other ones, if you look at the stonework in the back and the ground textures and stuff, it's super smooth. Like it's like they, like it's very recent. Some of the clothing is like very like not wrinkled, doesn't have any dirt on it. It's not, it's very plain and smooth looking, and
Mm.
it's there's parts that look better than other parts. So that was I observed that too. That was one of the things that kind of gave me pause, like, oh, this thing's not coming out for a while.
Yeah, so, like, yeah, that's the one thing. It's earlier in development. Like, I don't think it's coming anytime soon. So there's a lot of time for it to improve based past like beyond what they've shown here. But also, if it came out, looking like this or maybe a little bit more polished than this, I wouldn't be mad as long as
Sure, yeah.
they used the resources of the PS5 to improve on gameplay and level design, right?
Well,
If
that's
they had to scale back the character models and the graphics in order to
mm,
make like more of a larger environments or like more dynamic environments or like better gameplay with consistent frame rate, like if they had to like make that choice, like that's a choice I would want them to make all day because um like their previous AAA game Final Fantasy VII Remake, while it was very polished like in the character models and such, you had like lower resolution textures and backgrounds, so it was like a very uneven experience.
right.
So if coming off of that, they're already aware, like, okay, we got to maybe dial back the detail on the character models a little bit so that we can increase the
That
detail for
that
the gameplay and the environments, then
that that
that wouldn't be
sh-
too bad of a
sorry.
trade-off in my opinion.
That
So
shouldn't be an issue though for a PS5 game at all. Like that shouldn't even remotely be a concern, like for them to tone back the character models or anything like that for the textures. And from what we saw in the trailer, a lot of the textures were kind of basic looking. So but it is a good point that you brought up though, that this is the first trailer. This game isn't
mhm,
coming out probably for a while. And uh, you know, it's and also like you were bringing up that graphics aren't everything, so I'm totally with you there. If it did look like this, if it was a good story and a good game, then I would be totally fine with that too. The only reason that I even brought it up, or you brought it up, and I agreed with you, was that that kind of shows how far out the game is going to be from
mhm.
launch.
I think the style and the aesthetic has already won me over, so I'm not too concerned if it's not like the highest graphical fidelity ever. And I think if anything, Square can, if it helps them in the budget to cut back a little bit like that to make sure that everything's going the way it's supposed to, I'm all game. What I really want to know is how they'll take advantage of the features of the PS5 to
Not with
tell
the
its
visuals,
story and um like, how you have to like load into zones and stuff like that when you hit a zone line, like how
Oh yeah,
like having a seamless world
right.
is more possible than ever, and you don't have to like load up some big field of nothing. Like you can just like maybe kind of have it like Kingdom Hearts 3, where it's like a big zone to explore, but like it's like a branched map ultimately
right?
to the areas you go in, and maybe there is some kind of world map, or maybe it's just like a zone line thing. Again, but
Well, here's the.
I just
I,
want to see the hardware taken advantage of.
yeah, I totally
Mm,
agree. That it would be really cool if they can show some of that off. The thing is, like we brought up some of the textures, they got some work to do. And then also one of the things that PS5 is promising to bring is the amount of enemies that you can have on screen at one time, right? Whereas before you would have issues with, you might have lots of enemies on screen, but only 2 of them can attack at the same time. And a lot of enemies would take turns attacking. And you couldn't, there was stuff like that where limitations that made it difficult. And I brought up 2 off the top of my head. Different games find different ways to bring up different limits, but the PS5 was promising to kind of bring a limit to that. And I never saw that our hero fight anything more than just one creature at a time.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of a lot of spell effects and particle effects like on the screen happening. But yeah, I only one enemy at a time so far from what we've seen.
Now, like, the Marlboro fight and all that stuff. I mean, they definitely looks like possibly some cool fights, but yeah, I agree with you, Eric. Like, it'll be interesting to see this in a more final stage and really see them using the power of the PS5. It's just so weird that we're talking about a Final Fantasy game and we're kind of like, it's kind of lacking. And then the presentation and visual department, but
yeah, I think like the summons and like some of the enemies look like pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah.
The character models and like the general like little clips of gameplay that we saw it didn't blow me away like when I first saw Final Fantasy X or that conceptual trailer for Final Fantasy 13,
right,
or 15 even, which was versus 13 at
Yeah.
the time. Yeah,
But you wonder how far they can go at this point. I mean, I agree with you. Like, it didn't blow me away by any means. I like the visual style. That's what I was really into. But I'm kind of wondering how further they can do with these Final Fantasy model type characters until like you just hit that wall.
yeah.
Like, how can we make this look better? We can give them like pores in their face if you look up close with the camera,
some
like
stubble.
they did with 15. But yeah,
Right. Maybe like the PS5 controller can have like a little a smell thing, so you can, the character's burps, you can smell it or something. Really make it realistic. But
Immersion, right?
yeah, totally immersive. But one of the biggest takeaways I've gotten from this, that if I'm trying to be positive here, is that thank God Final Fantasy 16 is not Agnes Philosophy, and thank God it's not Project Athea, because those were 2. Okay, Agnes Philosophy was that 3-minute trailer where they had no idea. It was like a tech demo from like 4 years ago, and everyone thought that might be Final Fantasy 16. And there were some people that wanted that to be Final Fantasy 16. I'm like, why would you want that? They don't know anything about it. Do you want them to design an entire game based off this trailer? Again, stop. No, tell them not to do that. Right. So I'm glad that they don't have that. And then Project Athea was like, so if that ended up being 16, like that was more of a departure than this, so,
yeah.
So I'm really happy that those 2 games are not the mainline Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I agree. This seems like it actually has it was an idea before it was a trailer, right? Whereas
there's Joshua. Yeah,
like Project not Project Athea.
What's our main character's name?
I don't believe we know.
No. Maybe we get to name him.
Look in the book for like weather effects, and maybe you'll find his name in there somewhere.
Tempest. I don't know.
It's called Humid. Yeah. Anyways, he looks like Squall's younger brother.
His hair is not quite so crazy.
Right.
I'm not very impressed with the younger look, but the older look I'm definitely into.
Yeah, the older look looks better. Yeah, for sure. Maybe this is all just from the first 3 hours of the game. And there's that major spoiler event like Eric you were bringing up, and then and they're just spoiling the complete first 3 hours.
It could be. Yeah.
Or maybe it's like Breath of Fire 3 and they're advertising like both the child and adult aspects of the game.
In his older look, he gets some kind of tattoo like under his left eye and on his cheek. And his comrades early on in the trailer have that too.
I think they confirmed for you to find out what happened there, it's DLC. Like you have to buy that separately, 6 months after launch. Yeah.
When did he get the tattoo?
Yeah. Anyways, is there anything else you guys want to bring up about this trailer and the announcement? I'm glad that we have Final Fantasy 16 announced. This feels unreal to me right now. It just seems like, something from we always, guys, to give you a little bit of insight, when we're talking about topics for the next podcast, we always say, okay, these are the topics for, the next week's podcast, unless there's a trailer for Final Fantasy 16. It's kind of like a joke. Yeah. And like an inside joke, like, oh, like, imagine if that happened. And now we have a Final Fantasy 16 trailer. So it's kind of crazy that this thing actually exists.
And this is just a first impression too. If we want to get really nitty gritty with each and every scene in the trailer, we can gladly do that in the main podcast episode. But we just wanted to show off to everyone our first impressions. Seeing this is obviously a big deal. Where a lot of our channel is based off of main Final Fantasy releases. I got my kicks bitching off at 15 for years.
Yeah, totally. So I guess on that note, just as Eric was bringing up, a lot of news is going to be coming out about this over the next couple of days. There's a lot of rumor mill going on. There's a lot of speculation. So we're going to be keeping up to date on all the news articles that come out and all the little tweets and hubbub that goes on with this trailer. And we'll for sure talk about Final Fantasy 16 again. We'll probably talk it in the next episode. To be honest, we still got to figure out what we're going to talk about. But Final Fantasy 16 seems worthy of us talking about, perhaps again with more of a closer look on, specific things. But yeah, I think that's going to end us for today. So thank you for watching. And again, we will have another podcast out next week. But thank you for watching. Take it easy.
All right. Take care.
See you next time.
Okay, thank you again for listening and watching this podcast episode. It is available on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you can think to listen to your podcast. So please definitely go check us out there, subscribe on YouTube, leave a review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And please do not forget to check out our media partner at rpgfan.com. They're a great source of RPG news, reviews, and all sorts of great features on there. They're constantly putting stuff out. They have other RPG podcasts on there. They have Random Encounter, Retro Encounter, and then they restarted or rebooted the RPG podcast Rhythm Encounter, where they go through and analyze game soundtracks or RPG soundtracks. So some really cool stuff going on. They also have a really cool YouTube page where they've been putting together video reviews lately as well. RPG Fan on YouTube. So definitely go check that out. But they've been really great to work with. And I just want to make sure that you know and are aware of them and that you're checking them out. But we'll have to leave it there. And we look forward to chatting some more about Final Fantasy 16 next week. Take it easy, guys.